I want to get a take on the journalism piece of this and why it's important for brands. And again, you pointed out that it's any company. So agencies, for example, are brands. And agencies struggle with this quite a bit.
Mhm.
The journalism discipline and the importance of retaining that as you're thinking about what brand publishing is. Walk us through a little bit of what you've observed and how it's changed and grown.
I mean, look, I think this is like the first question that, sort of that we really put to ourselves when we were trying to figure out, how do we cover this industry and this discipline and this sector as it's emerging? And what are some of the sort of most salient questions that people have? And one of the biggest questions that people had when we sort of first started writing about this a couple of years ago was like, how does brand publishing interplay with and work alongside kind of, let's call it traditional news media? Let's not even sort of get to the term journalism because I think it's
Mm-hmm.
loaded. I think people have a lot of misconceptions about
Sure.
what it is. There's trade journalism, et cetera. So how does this interplay with it? And I think one of the most it's interesting. We wrote, we were sort of reporting on a piece. Jack and I actually wrote this one together, and we were trying to ask people, how do these kind of lines work? And a lot of people were starting to say something really interesting. There was, and there is a pretty loud minority, let's call it a vocal minority, that were sort of, talking about using brand content as a way to sort of supersede or sidestep the media. This is happening sort of in certain corners of kind of different industries. People don't like what the journalists are saying about them. They're saying, "Oh, we can," and this term kind of kept coming up, going direct. Um,
Mm.
and going direct to your audience, et cetera. So I think, there was that. And that was, arguably, now that we've been covering it for sort of a couple years at this point, we've sort of realized over time that the more people we talk to is that is a very vocal minority. I think most people, most brands are really going into this are not doing so really with the idea that, oh, we're going to go and supersede media, we're going to sidestep it, and so on. They sort of have much more kind of, what we found were sort of more prosaic reasons for doing so.
Mm-hmm.
One was, customer acquisition costs were rising. It was getting more and more difficult for them to acquire customers in the ways they've been doing it. It was also proving to be less effective using sort of some of the older ways of doing it. Two, there were times that a lot of these companies operated in spaces that just weren't being covered by journalists because they weren't at that moment interesting. There wasn't something newsworthy happening. Maybe there
Mm.
wasn't a specific sort of reason to cover it. And it's funny because as a reporter, I understand that I turn down stories all the time because I just do not think that they're what our audience wants to hear about right now. I do not consider it newsworthy, whatever that means. And I think, for a variety of reasons, because people were operating in certain disciplines, people were operating in certain sectors and industries. There were things happening in their industry that the press just did not find, interesting to them to cover. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of brands were sort of saying, "Oh, well, we'll cover it," and this isn't meant to be sort of, "Oh, well, if you don't cover it, we'll cover it." It was just, well, we'll write about it because we also have a way to reach audiences.